Welcome to the Festival of Entrepreneurs, recorded live at the NEC in Birmingham. Over the next few minutes, you'll hear from some of the most incredible founders, investors, and business leaders who joined us this year.
Good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here and back in Birmingham. So the Scale Up Institute was formed just over 10 years ago now to deal with the very conundrum that you so ably articulated there about the UK being third in the world at starting up a business, but 13th in the world at scaling up a business. And it was set up by the private sector, co-founded by myself and some entrepreneurs and some significant partners to really look to address that challenge, which is all something that we as a whole ecosystem need to be focused on across the country. And from day one, we set our mandate up to be working across the country with all of the economic development agencies, the now mayoral combined authorities, the universities, the entrepreneurs and financiers in the local environment. Because if we get our scale-up journey right, we unlock huge amounts of employment and also economic growth. So when we talk about small and medium-sized enterprises, we sometimes think they're all the same, and they're not. We have our startup phase, we have our scaling up phase, we have our staying ahead phase. And of our 5.5 million SMEs today, who are huge contributors, 2.4 trillion to the UK economy, there's over 34,000 scale-ups, another 16,000 in the pipeline that contribute 60% of that. So all of your entrepreneurs here who are growing are contributing to that scale-up journey, and the Scale Up Institute has been set up to look to address the barriers that you as the CEOs of those businesses say they face in access to markets, in access to talent, in access to finance, in access to infrastructure, the space to grow, and in access to the R&D activity that can also help build that innovation that you have. So that's what we're here to do, and we'll get more into that shortly.
Thank you very much. Louis.
Thank you, Liam, and thanks also Irene. So the British Business Bank, we're the government's economic development bank, and they're to help entrepreneurs to start businesses, scale businesses, and help them, as Irene said, stay ahead here in the UK. We are in a free market economy, and despite being government-owned, the largest investor in venture capital and growth equity in the UK. Go figure what that says about risk appetite in our institutional investment landscape. And everything I think Liam gave us in terms of context is what we're there to address. Rather than sitting admiring the problem, which we're all kind of quite agreed on, we have a range of interventions that are intended to be catalytic to the private market, to get more private market money investing in exactly the space I talked about, the startups, scale-ups, and helping businesses to thrive. We've got a range of national programs, everything from a startup loan. There will be, just outside, there is an organization, British Biz, who is a distributor of startup loans. We do 11,000 a year. We're moving up to 19,000 a year. We've had our first unicorn from a startup loan. This is up to £25,000 to start a business. If you don't have rich friends and family, we'll be your rich friends and family. And we have a range of other interventions that go all the way up to scale-up companies that are science and tech-led. So going forward from the 1st of April, we'll be able to write a cheque of £50 million into an individual company, which is real, true scale-up capital. And we've got a range of interventions all the way through. I think the critical thing is that here in Birmingham and other regions across the UK outside of the so-called Golden Triangle, there is a real paucity of equity finance. And that paucity of equity finance has a number of causes, but not least is the lack of a really broad investor base across the rest of the UK. We've got London as a financial hub, but actually it's not serving the rest of the UK, certainly in the entrepreneurial economy, very well. So we're trying to build up the investor base around the UK, not only through demonstrating the returns that can be had through our nations and regions investment funds, but we're also almost doubling the capacity of regional angel syndicates around the UK. Angel syndicates being disproportionately powerful in investing locally. They are involved in more university spin-outs than any other kind of investor class. But they also bring more than just the capital, to Liam's earlier point. They bring mentoring, because very often the angels themselves have been entrepreneurs, and they bring networks that can be incredibly powerful for the companies that they're backing. So a range of interventions. I will pause largely there, but this is a critical part of the economy that we really need to stop benignly neglecting.
Thank you very much, Louis. Anthony. Muster the last of your energy for the week.
No, I'm still going strong, Liam. Don't worry about me. Look, good morning, everyone, and great to be here in Birmingham here today. My name's Anthony MP. I'm Chief Executive of an organisation called Be the Business. We were set up in order to help smaller businesses improve their productivity. I think productivity is kind of one of those words that we kind of think we know the meaning of. Like, we know when we've had a productive day, like it's kind of a feeling, you know. And interestingly, Microsoft did some research about what people meant when they said they had a productive day, and the thing that scored most highly is if you get through your inbox. If you get through your inbox, you feel productive. That's not the productivity we're interested in. The productivity we're interested in is the productivity of your businesses. And that's important, going back really to your opening remarks, Liam. If your businesses are productive, it is a key generator of wealth. And it's a key generator of wealth for your organizations. Because if your business is productive, it means that essentially you're producing more with the same resources. That's the, you know, if I was an economist, I'm not. But if you asked an economist, that's what they would define as productivity. So if you can do more with the same resources, your business will produce more profits, it will be able to be more successful, it will drive growth, but it's good growth. It's growth that drives wealth. And so from sort of our own organization's point of view, it's a really, really important thing. But the other thing about productivity is if you do that across all businesses and all businesses become more productive, it drives higher wages, improves resilience both for the businesses and for employment, and that growth in the economy, which is the thing that we hear politicians talk about all the time, that growth is unlocked. In fact, it's the only way that the UK can grow its economy is improving the productivity of its businesses and its public sector. And so that's why we're interested in it. So drives the wealth in your businesses, it also drives the wealth in our economy, which our businesses then benefit from. So that's why we should care so much about productivity.
Thank you very much. And Ian.
Thank you. So it's great to be here. I'm literally from just down the road in Coventry, but FSB are the organisation, national organisation, to do two things for you as entrepreneurs. Every big business started off as a micro business. And in that early days as a micro business, you need somebody to wrap your arms around you. You've no longer got that big corporate machine behind you to support you. You need that support and help. So FSB does that bit. We've got some of that support and help for people just starting out. But crucially as well, we're about making sure the environment is right for small businesses to grow from being a micro business to a small business to a medium-sized business to a large business. And to do that, you need the right environment. And a lot of that environment is set by the public sector, by the government, and of course by some of the big companies as well. So our other role, and where I'd love to hear some of your views today as you go through the questions, is, you know, what are those sticking points? What are the challenges that stopped that initial side hustle, that initial idea, becoming a great, thriving business? And we take that with the biggest business organisation in the UK, take those views, we do surveying, things like that, take those views to those who can make the decisions and say, look, I know you think this is a really good idea, but just maybe you need to think about some of these downside impacts of this really good idea that you've had, or businesses are really struggling in this area. How about doing something like this to really support and help them? And I'm really keen to sort of see what ideas you've got that could help make that happen, and we can take those forward for you. So that's what I'm here for.
And why should everybody here be a member of the FSB?
Because it's just, I've been a member for 30 plus years, and it's that support network around you as a small business person that often you can feel very isolated starting and growing a business. And so it's great to have that network of support around you.
Well, that kind of takes me into the first thing I'd really like to discuss, which is we'll come to the institutional and organizational issues. But I'd like to begin with what we touched upon earlier, which was the cultural one. And that's, you know, you go to the United States, people set up businesses, businesses fail. It's not regarded as the greatest sin since time immemorial for a business to fail. Do we have a cultural problem in the UK with risk, with all the elements that will contribute to a sort of an environment where people want to try to set up a business?
I don't think, time and again, I always have debates around whether our entrepreneurs are ambitious enough, and I actually think they're hugely ambitious. And our scaling businesses, despite all the different macro headwinds, still want to grow, and they're determined to grow. What I don't think we're good at, though, is in responding to that, do we have the risk capital in the system? So a staggering fact is that our institutions, our equity players, our pension funds, only contribute at the moment 4% of equity into any type of UK company. It used to be more than 60%. But that money that is so important to bring into our growth economy is currently now sitting in corporate or government bonds, and we need to unlock that. So that risk aversion has grown into our institutional players. And I do think at an entrepreneurship level, in the US you have more embedded in the early stage curriculum of entrepreneurship being good, venture capital training being given, so understanding that risk, and that understanding that failure is okay, because actually you learn from that, you bounce back and you go again. And I think all those elements at sometimes aren't necessarily as ingrained here, to think that entrepreneurship is a good thing as we go through the journey of whether it's our early years at school. But the good thing is more and more businesses are setting up and starting up and more scaling up. So we're getting something right in nuggets everywhere.
Do you think, Anthony, that you're nodding there, I mean, do you think there is a change in the culture?
Well, I mean, I think you only have to watch TV to see the difference. So if you watch Dragon's Den, that's sort of a version, that's like the UK version of entrepreneurship. And then you watch Shark Tank, which is like drinking about 200 espressos. I mean, it's super high energy, entrepreneurship, in your face. It's very, very American. But for me, it's the cultural difference. You know, in America, it's really cool to be an entrepreneur. And it's coolish to be here. And when I started my entrepreneurial journey 20 years ago, I know I don't look old enough, but I did 20 years ago. You know, like, there just wasn't the sort of the entrepreneurial role models. And now being an entrepreneur is a credible career. But in America, you're a rock star if you're an entrepreneur. And I think that's the gap. You know, and I think US, don't get me wrong, I spent some time working in Silicon Valley, and it also has its downsides. But there is an approach to business and like everyone's got a side hustle. I remember I was there maybe 20 years ago, and I met somebody from eBay, and they were writing a script for a Hollywood movie, and they had like a startup as well, and they were working for eBay. It's just the whole country is geared around starting businesses, growing businesses. I think we're on the journey, but we need to get better at it for sure.
Just worth asking our audience, think back to when you did career fairs at school. How often was it suggested you might go into business as opposed to maybe going into law or medicine or whatever? Hands up, how many were encouraged at a school careers fair to go into business? Yeah, well, that maybe says...
Can I share a story?
You can share a story.
On that. So I started my business when I was 17 at school. I did young enterprise at school, and on my report at the end of my lower sixth was, if Ian put as much effort into his studies as he puts into young enterprise, he would be doing a lot better. Strangely enough, I don't think I've used my physics since leaving school, but my skills and what I learned from young enterprise went on to form the basis of my business and what I've done since. And that, I think, leads on to a really important point, though. I went to a school in a relatively affluent area with network. When I started my business, there was an accountant lived opposite me. I knocked on the door. I said, what do I do with this VAT return thing? If you live in an area which doesn't have that around you, that network, the school that you go to doesn't have that sort of network and sort of approach, what do you do and how do you start? And I think the side hustle thing, there were lots of young people with some great ideas for side hustles. They're doing stuff, all of that sort of thing. How do we, rather than getting the, when are you going to stop doing that and get a real job response, say, actually, here's some business help, here's some business guidance, we'll wrap some support around you, turn that great idea you've got into the next great business. And I think if you're in it's actually, if you're in more affluent areas, more sort of businessy areas, that sort of happens a bit now compared to when I was at school. if you're in an area where that doesn't happen, they're still going, sorry, get a real job.
Lou, I mean, in your time, particularly in UK export finance, how would you assess the British culture towards entrepreneurship compared to our best competitors elsewhere?
Look, I think that what Anthony's highlighted about the difference between Shark Tank and Dragon's Den is a cultural difference. It's not necessarily a bad thing inherently. So that high octane intensity is not sustainable for anybody. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So you've got to kind of have some element of level-headedness. I think in the UK, we do not have a problem with individual risk-taking culture. You look at the number of people who are buying crypto. You look at the 850,000 new companies registered at Companies House last year. There's, at an individual level, a lot of entrepreneurial spirit. And I think the risk appetite of our institutions is where we kind of run into an issue. When those companies need institutional help, that's when their ambition gets a bit suppressed. And I think you can't divorce the cultural issues from some of the structural issues around the way we've regulated, particularly our pension funds. And actually, the good news is, firstly, we're still quite good at all of this. We're the third biggest venture capital market in the world. We're bigger than Germany, France, and Sweden combined. But we could be so much better. We're a phenomenal innovation ecosystem, and this is not about the amount of money we have. We've got all the money. We've got the second largest funded pension scheme in the world. We've got an allocation issue with that, which is a risk appetite issue, which is a cultural issue.
So I want to come on to, my view, which you sort of shared there, that it's a two-edged cultural thing. It's those who want to start their businesses and the impetus they have, but also the culture of the institutions and their willingness to help them.
We're a really innovative nation, right? Hugely innovative, lots of ideas. And actually, in some respects, some people call us the incubator nation for the world, because all of you out here have brilliant ideas, which others then come along and want to buy or develop. So I think we've got to recognise that. And it's how we make that more sustainable, that scaling up phase.
I want to pick up on some of the ideas that you've already enunciated. But Anthony, you were talking about productivity. There's been this great big debate recently with the downgrading of Britain's assessment on productivity. Where is the failure? And why is it that we seem to have lower productivity rates than some of our international competitors?
I mean, that's the billion-dollar question, Liam, I'll be honest.
That's why I asked it.
And I'm not sure whether I can answer it, and certainly not in the time available. Look, I think there's a multitude of issues, and actually, if we just look at sort of UK's productivity journey pre sort of the financial crisis, 2008, the UK's productivity growth was pretty good. In fact, we were sort of right at the top of the G7 league table in terms of productivity growth, and it was driven a lot by the introduction and use of technology in particular. And then in 2008, it stopped sort of dead in its track, and really what we've seen since 2008 is fairly flatline growth, a flatline sort of productivity. So almost no growth in productivity since 2008. And that's a long time for there to be little or no productivity. Now, there's a variety of reasons for that, but the things that we see, and the things that we see in businesses, so sort of really relevant for today's discussion, is that we see that businesses don't use technology as much as they could. And again, if we look at sort of our comparison with our sort of international peers, particularly those in the sort of the G7 group, they're just implementing technology much faster than we are. Now, I think I'm really encouraged by a lot of the talk around AI at the moment, and I think we've got real opportunity to catch up in terms of our use of AI by businesses. And then the other area that we see sort of time and again is that there is a sort of a lack of leadership and management skills across businesses of all sizes. This is not just small businesses, big businesses have this problem as well. And that's partly because, very often, if you're an entrepreneur, you have an idea, you're good at whatever you do. You say, actually, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to start a business, and nobody teaches you how to run a business. Very much like you said, Ian, you kind of just make it up as you go along. That's fine, but it kind of creates a bit of a glass ceiling in terms of how you drive growth. So sort of developing some of those management skills are really, we know it sounds really boring, I'm sorry, but we know that if you just improve management and leadership skills, and you do some studies, whether it's at sort of the local college or the local university, you do that, helps grow management program, whatever it is, we know that those businesses just perform better. So I think they're the two things that we see time and time again. But Louis, I know that you'll sort of talk about investment, because again, investment is behind that of our international peers. And if we can create the right environment for businesses to invest more and to give businesses confidence, I think at the moment, we're all feeling, a little bit cautious. We don't know what's going to happen. We're a bit worried about the budget. Everything is a bit uncertain, and so that makes investment difficult. It's not just the supply of money. Businesses have got to want to borrow it or bring in investors, and I think there's a bit of a disconnect happening at the moment as well.
Okay, so this point about businesses not using AI or technology as much as their peers, how do I know if I'm one of the people sitting here today that I'm doing better, as well, or worse than my peers? Who tells me how well I'm doing that, and where do I go for help to ensure that I'm at the front of the curve and not behind it?
You come to be the business, Liam. I mean, that's the solution. If you come to be the business, we've got all the answers. I can't do a bigger plug than that. Thank you for setting me up.
This is
Your customer.
This is
brilliant.
This is going to be a bidding war. So next, Irene.
And also Irene's side. And the FSB. Sorry.
No. I mean, I think this is why we can't talk about businesses all being the same. Our scaling businesses are in the tech. They are adopters of AI, big data, quantum. They're planning that for the future. What they can't always find is the skill sets they need coming again out of our school education and general population to fill the roles they have. And that's why we also need the international talent coming in. So I think we've got to recognise some of our most exciting, innovative, scale-up businesses are really drivers of innovation. They're driving productivity as well. They're more highly productive than their peers. So one of the things that I think is so important, this is why this festival is so important, is the most important thing we hear from all of the businesses we meet is knowing your peers and being able to talk to your peers and really be in a peer group or come to events like this where you can really talk and learn from each other is one of the most valuable things. And those are things we have to get better at in connecting people to peers, mentors, and to the right non-execs who they're seeking to get on the board at the right time.
I think it's a really good point around look, there's a huge variety of businesses, and personally, I just hate the term SME.
Yeah.
Like I think we should ban the term SME in this festival because it's just a really poor description.
Which they have actually.
It's really
Massive
poor description of businesses and the range of businesses that exist, because you've got scale-ups, you've got startups, you've got solo entrepreneurs, you've got businesses that are not scale-ups but not startups but probably growing at 5 or 10%, which are awesome businesses. You've got businesses that employ 10 people, and there's such a variety. And just to try to kind of group 5.2 million businesses under a single category and say, there you go, we're going to just deliver a range of services to you, I think sort of helps explain why sometimes government policy doesn't quite hit the mark, because it's trying to do this much work in a group that's really rich and diverse and complex.
Just a simple example of that, we often have, to apply for this, you need to be over 5 employees. But many startups now do not want employees. They're looking at, how do we bring a network of freelancers together, create something. You still need the leadership skills. You still need the management skills. You've still got to run projects. You've still got to develop and grow the business. But it doesn't mean you've got 5 employees. You're doing it in a new way, in a different way. The world has changed from I need to grow my business, so I need to take on another employee type concept.
And on this point that's being made about networking and mentors, what does your organization do to take that further, and how does the ecosystem need to improve?
So network, the one thing I encourage any young person, anybody looking at start, even before they've got a business idea ready to start, is get networking. And the reason is exactly as Anthony's just expressed, that's how you find out the ideas, the bits that you don't know in your business. It's not from often going on a formal course, it's from talking to your peer who's just been through that journey. Learn, don't make the mistakes I made, this is what you can do instead. And the FSB is great at, it's a great organisation for networking. There's networks happening, there's one tomorrow in Coventry and things all over the place. You can get together. And what I really like about FSB's network is it's a real mix of businesses that I find when I go to some of those groups, from manufacturing through to services, through to sport and leisure. And so you get that real mix of ideas and so on being put, and different experiences that people are able to share. But the other thing, mentoring, and this goes back to the comment I made earlier, if we want to get young people ready to grow and develop businesses, they need to be brought alongside people who can say, just here's a bit of signposting, here's a bit of direction to go on that way. And that's that mentoring. And so how do we connect people up with that? How do we allow young people to see that mentoring is something valuable, that networking is something valuable? We've said it's really easy to start a business in this country. You can set a limited company up this afternoon from this morning. But knowing all the things you then have to do in the first year of that business is something that, if you've just got a great idea about a product or service, you don't know. And I think we need to get much better at connecting people up with that.
So, Liam, to your earlier, I agree with all of that. To your earlier point, Liam, about government standing back where it isn't needed, the mentoring should be a private sector-led undertaking. Maybe government should be able to support it. So, for example, the startup loans I was talking about, that has embedded mentoring from a private sector organisation in it. And the companies, so the loan recipients that take up the mentorship, are disproportionately performing better than those who don't. So this is really, really important, but it is not the government's role to give the business advice. This has got to be private sector led, because ultimately businesses have got to stand on their own two feet.
And on that point, Lee, because you shouldn't lose it, we have just set up as a private sector a National Business Mentoring Council.
Yeah.
Anthony and I are part of that. A whole range of players around the country are to join this up. There'll be a new launch of a platform called Mentors Me to find mentors, and so there is this kind of private sector but government supported activity, and National Mentoring Day is on the 27th of October, so you'll see more about that coming your way. So if you're interested in that, get in touch with Anthony or I or anyone else that's
but also look at the stands out there and the number of advisors and mentors and all the rest that's out there. And they're small businesses like a lot of the people.
Barclays and NatWest, they have all mentoring schemes as well.
I mean, I think the thing is there's no secret recipe for your business to be successful. Like, every business success follows a similar path. And maybe there's multiple paths, but it's not, there's not a sort of a secret formula that you have to work out to build your business success. It's been done before. And I think, you are all here to learn from one another, learn from these panelists, certainly not from me, and from some of the other speakers that are here today. So, there is a piece around how as business leaders we are responsible for our learning journey. But the most powerful thing is to have a mentor, like just having somebody that you can talk to. And the thing is, a mentor, a really good mentor, just helps you work out your own answer to the problem. Like every business has its sort of unique features, and you as business leaders know the way through the maze. Just sometimes you need somebody to talk to who can take you through that process. And so that's why I think mentoring is so important, is because you know how to build your businesses and make your businesses successful. Just sometimes you need a bit of time out. And that's really difficult, because I know that in this room are some of the hardest working people in the economy. I know that you're doing 12 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. It is the toughest job out there. And so sometimes it just feels impossible to take that time out to say, I don't know the answer to this problem. And that's where I think a mentor can just help unlock all those things, all that potential that your business has.
And I'm really interested to hear that this is being set up, because, in fact, we set that up in DIT in 2017.
Yeah,
so
I'm what happens. People, we set something up in 2010 when I was in the banking industry. But
very interesting to do that. We're already reinventing the wheel.
With many more entities that now offer that service as well.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about money briefly before I come to questions from our actual businesses. Talk about what you described, Louis, as the lack of risk appetite in funding providers. Tell us about that.
Just as SMEs is too big a phrase, funding providers is very broad as well. Let's just take the pension funds for a moment. Initially, when we transferred from primarily a defined benefit to a defined contribution system in the UK 25 years ago, defined contributions, pensions were set up to minimize costs. And what that meant was, as trustees tried to minimize costs, instead of actively selecting investments as they had done under defined benefit schemes, they invest in indexes, and then they get advised to go for a global index, and they reduce their costs fantastically, but they find they're 4% invested in the UK, because the UK is 4% of global GDP. And the fetishizing of that kind of diversification is really at the heart of a lot of what of the issues in the pension industry now. And if we ask all of us, how comfortable are we that only 4% of our pension money is invested in the UK, we'd all probably be a bit surprised and disappointed. And I think we'd want to see our money investing in the growth of our economy, providing an economy that is going to employ our children and grandchildren, and actually be a place that we all want to retire into, where the infrastructure is good, where the buildings are good, but where there's vibrant businesses as well that are going to employ our kids.
And how do we compare with our peers in G7 or G20?
So look, the issues we've got around risk appetite and investing in our own sort of scaling businesses are very, very similar across Europe and Canada. The US is the outlier here, and it's US VC that really is, it's called the Atlantic Drift. Our good businesses, just as they become really economically significant and wanting to scale, it's the scale-up capital has come from the US, and they migrate to where their capital has come from.
You right at the very beginning, you talked about the barriers to scale up.
Yeah.
What would you say were the top three?
Well, the top three, we talk a lot about finance, but the top one is access to markets. If you want to call it a growth hack, one of the things that will allow you to grow is exporting, as you said right at the beginning. And our scaling businesses are highly global, highly want to export more and to broad markets, but they want to get those connections to the overseas buyers, the overseas opportunities. So one of the things, building on the work you did when you were a minister, is how do we build up that international trade offering even better, because the public sector truly has the end-to-end connections of any entity, and then how we lean in with the private sector. So Grow London's a great example of how it's trying to do that, and how do we replicate that across the country is something. Then you've got the access to corporate buying, corporate procurement, corporate collaboration. That's the biggest challenge. Then we get into talent. How do I get the right people, both at my board level, my leadership level, the right training and the right skills into the company? And then we get into that access to growth capital, and particularly that equity capital. And then when we look at the drivers of local growth, we know that's developing clusters and hubs, access to skilled talent, and also getting that growth capital. So both the challenges and the answers need to come together and be much more able to be connected. We've got the ingredients in the UK, but we're not doing that well at the minute, both from a public and private sector, in getting them out to the businesses that are in this room. And that's something we've got to solve.
Joining the dots.
Joining the dots, yeah.
It's interesting. I did a tour of the country in February of this year, and I set myself the target of visiting 100 businesses across the UK in 5 days. I got to 117, thank you for asking. And what was interesting, I spoke to lots and lots of businesses that were growing well, but were putting off investment decisions because they were waiting for orders from typically local government or some sort of public sector procurement. And I just think there's a massive missed opportunity for public sector buying to be more efficient. Because if it is, certainly I met lots of businesses that would employ more people, employ more apprentices, make those sort of long-term investments we need businesses to make. But for as long as that sort of public sector procurement is efficient and inefficient and drawn out and uncertain, businesses just won't make the investments they need to make. And that's going to be really important. We need to grow the economy, and so businesses need to be able to invest with confidence.
And Anthony's right about government. I mean, Liam, 18% of employees are public sector, but almost 40% of the economy is public sector.
And I just want to say, the private sector has leaned into this. So an entrepreneur, Sahar Hashimi, set up Coffee Republic a long time ago. Now, if you're a woman who's got a retail product, go to Buy Women Built. She's actually built an environment where you can get access into the larger corporates and consumers to buy from women-led businesses. And I think that's a great example of a private sector initiative that could be replicated into other areas.
Oh, and just quickly on the access to finance, we talked a lot about investment finance, but of course one of the access to finance is making sure the supply chain gets paid on time. And one of the big problems we still have in the UK is late payment. And actually, small businesses, that money, if it was just paid on time, or preferably slightly early, from the bigger players in the supply chain, would release finance into the small businesses that would allow them to have confidence to invest and grow.
Absolutely. Now, I want to take a few questions from our audience here. Who wants to? I'll take two very quick rounds of questions. James, I'm going to make you run. I'm going to pick one there and then one way over there.
There's two there, actually.
There we are.
Thank you. I really like what you were saying about the sort of mentorship. But actually, when I've been talking to some of the small businesses that we work with, one of the things that Dave really found valuable is when their clients sponsor them. And when I say sponsor, and it's the same as sponsoring an individual within your own company, is giving them opportunities. And it's quite often that's seen as a dirty word because that's sort of breaking the usual sort of tendering to three and all of the rest of it. I work in the construction industry, by the way. But quite often the most successful relationships actually come from sponsoring a business to say, I trust you, I believe in you. Not just mentoring and them, here's some good advice and I'll walk away, but actual sponsorship. Just wondered about the views on that.
Yeah, thank you. And the second was another one. Yes.
Thank you. I mean, this is more aimed at you, and earlier you mentioned that the productive growth has flatlined over the past 17 years. What's been the biggest hindrance of that, and why over the nearly 2 decades we haven't made any progress?
Okay, right. So that's sponsoring and productivity, and just to add to the point Lou is making, we might want to consider why 3 years after the end of the pandemic, we've got 200,000 civil servants more than we had at the beginning of the pandemic, if we're talking about the costs that taxpayers and businesses are having to do, because I'm quite sure they're not all being employed helping businesses become more productive or more efficient. Who wants to take that one? Irene.
I mean, on sponsorship, I think it can come in many forms, right? I think it can be, I'll bring you into some of my leadership programs, or I'll buy from you, or I'll get you connected to, you're selling to me, but there's this other company up the road. I think those are ways in which I would call sponsorship that really makes a difference. And I do think there are more and more corporates and businesses and business to business who are referring each other to opportunities. I think it's a great point that you make.
Yeah, I'd add in that I think big business has a much greater responsibility than I think they understand for helping smaller businesses. Without any criticism to JLR, the JLR situation, their interest in keeping their supply chain, not just tier 1, but then they've realized tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers, intact through this interruption is really, really important. And so to the point about, prompt payment, all sorts of other things. But in terms of sponsorship, the other element to this that we see is that UK primes tend to do corporate venture capital far, far less than certainly their US counterparts and very often their European counterparts as well. And the preference for most UK primes is to wait until something's up and running and generating revenue, then they do M&A. And they'll buy the thing in and integrate it. But actually, I think there is a real role to play for primes to help sponsor innovation, which comes from SMEs a lot more.
Yeah. Anthony.
Well, first of all, Brian, thank you for your question. And, obviously, Mace Business School is a great example of an organisation that invests in its supply chain. And it's not just about training and mentoring, but it's a much bigger strategic investment, and a lot to learn from the work that Mace is doing. I think lots of big businesses could do more and follow your example. I think the question that you asked about why is there no growth, again, it's a massive question, and I almost certainly won't do it justice. I suppose just a quick reflection, since 2016 we've had a lot of uncertainty as business leaders, and so you've had sort of Brexit, and you've had COVID, and you've had energy inflation. Seriously, the last decade has been the toughest decade, I think, for running any business at all. So we really, all of us running businesses, we're doing a staggering job in a tough headwind. I think the other thing my personal reflection is I think there's a lot of recognition given to bigger businesses, but the real superheroes in the economy are small business leaders. I mean, really, we do all the heavy lifting. We represent the biggest proportion of businesses by far. We employ 3/5 of all people. We are the powerhouse of the economy. And I think we deserve more recognition than we get at the moment, I'll be honest.
And interesting, if you look at the stats of investment in skills and personal development since 2008, and you look at the graph of productivity, there's a close correlation. I know correlation doesn't always mean causation, but I think there is a strong connection there. We've struggled to perhaps invest as much in people's personal development, and as leaders, I don't think we've invested enough in our own personal development, and that will inevitably have an impact on productivity, because if you don't know how to grow and what's available and what the picture can look like, then you're not going to be able to deliver that in your business. And again, small businesses do need a bit of support and so on that. So how do we make sure that?
And you mentioned cash flow and being paid on time. I mean, in construction, the phrase subby bashing is part of the vocabulary. What advice do you give to your members who are not getting paid on time?
So obviously, you've got the tools that we've got as FSB members to do some of the chasing letters, to do that process, to report it, even though there tends to be this reticence in the UK about, I don't want to rock the boat with that key customer because, then I may not get that business in the future. But there are tools with the Small Business Commissioner and things like that to report some of that. And we're very much, though, looking to government, though, to step in a bit into this space, to say, actually, you need to make big business, not just say, it'd be a good idea if you paid on time, sign up to this code, but we really won't do much about it, but say, if you don't pay on time, then you don't get that next public procurement opportunity. If you don't pay on time, it's going to be reported as part of your annual reporting. And we've got to get far tougher, bigger stick to some of the big businesses to say, you need to be not just pay it lip service, but actually do this.
Yeah, and also it'd be nice if central government and even more local government paid small businesses on time, given that it's their own money that they're being paid with effectively through the taxes.
So look, there's no substitute for getting paid on time, that's right. But I would say the landscape of sources of finance for small business, debt finance for small businesses, is transformed over the last 10 years, including in terms of invoice discounting. And just out there again, go look around, there's at least 2 platforms offering invoice discounting. Take the invoice that you have raised today to them, and you can get your cash, admittedly at a discount, but you'll get it today. So there are opportunities to, if you don't want to cheese your customer off, there are ways of doing this which are easier than they used to be.
Definitely some benefits there, but on the, why do why do we have to go down that route? At the end of the day, we need to get better at making businesses just getting paid, so we don't have to reduce the profit margin on an invoice to pay an invoice for invoicing discounting.
Now we're getting warmed up. I have time to 2 very, very quick questions, James.
We have 3 minutes, so we need one more.
There's
One there.
I feel like I'm monopoling the size of this.
Towards
go.
the cheap seats at the back.
Hold on, let's get this done.
Thank you, James. Drew Curry, ISE and Hibret 1. Question to all of you. If there was one thing that you could change that would make the most effective difference to businesses in the UK, what would that be? Because for me, I think at the moment in the UK, we're kind of rubbish in business. 60% of businesses fail within 3 years. If I had a car that had that kind of reliability, I'd get rid of it. So what would you say that single thing would be?
Thank you very much, because that's the very same question I was going to ask them all at the end. So we've got 2 minutes left. That gives you 30 seconds each to give us the one thing that you would change. We'll start with you.
Ooh. I've already done the late payment, so I won't do that one again. I think it's the ability to get the skills you need at the time you need it to develop your business. We have challenges around skills. We have challenges around the complexity of employment. Let's just start making that easier and cheaper, so that as we need people, as we need the right skills, the right capability within our business, it's available and we can get on with growing and developing the business.
Louis.
So look, without kind of some Panglossian view, we do need to create an atmosphere of positivity. We are actually way better than poor at business. And we have so many good industries in the UK, and we never trumpet them. And whilst I can put a really good news story about a local business into the regional press, I'll never get a look in at the national press with a good news story. And we've got to create an atmosphere of positivity, because unless you have that ambient positivity, you're not going to get going on anything. It's far easier to go from 5,000 feet to 25,000 feet in an aeroplane than to get it off the ground. If we're down on the ground or underground because we're talking ourselves down there, we're never going to get going. So cultural change.
Anthony.
I think, I could say, learn stuff, but you're all here to learn stuff, so I don't need to tell you that. I think, if there's one piece of advice I'd give, is I'd say, be courageous. Because I don't accept what you're saying about we're rubbish at business, because I think you've got to fail. Like, failure is not a bad thing, because failure teaches you what not to do next. And so you've got to kind of go out there and you've got to fail and you've got to get up and do it again. You've got to keep failing and you've got to have the courage to keep failing. And in that process you learn, and you learn so much. And I think that's what I would encourage every entrepreneur, every small business leader to do. Have courage to keep on your journey.
Ari.
So I agree with everybody else, and I would just start up that celebrate success. You're not alone if you fail. Most businesses that start up do fail, but then they go again and are successful. But I think the big thing we've got to do, we've got loads of initiatives in the public and private sector, maybe too many, but we are not good at the moment at connecting up the opportunity to the business and the scale up. So I take a lesson from my private sector book. And, we're seeing more and more of our finance institutions putting account management towards and relationship management towards businesses. We need to see that happening in the public sector as well. Much more relationship, account management, and connecting up the opportunities into yourselves in a much more proactive way than we're doing at the moment.
So we've highlighted a number of the issues, I think, that will be reflected throughout the next 2 days. I think that we've set out what many of the problems are. And I hope that you will be interrogating the very many talented people you'll be seeing about what the solutions, maybe including in your own businesses, and also highlighting the opportunities that you can provide, including to one another. Networking is a very key part of these exhibitions. So I'd like to thank our panel very much for their insights. We could have gone on for a very long time. And I hope you'll join me in thanking them for their insights.
Thanks for watching this special episode from the Festival of Entrepreneurs. Our mission is simple: to help founders and business owners grow faster, think bigger, and take action. And if you were part of the event, thank you for joining us and being part of the community. And if you missed it, don't worry. We'll be back with even more ideas, inspiration, and opportunities to help you take your business to the next level. You can find out more and register for future events at festivalofentrepreneurs.co.uk.